Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am Dan Schmidt. This is the Deer Talk Now podcast. We appreciate you joining us. All we ask you to do is like or subscribe wherever you're listening to it. My crack producer, Isabella Riggs. We're coming at you. We come at you every Thursday. So if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Amazon or wherever you're listening to the podcast, downloading it, you can also watch the video versions, and you're going to want to watch this one because this one is pretty cool. We're going to share some of the clips from his show. You might already recognize him. That's Dean Partridge, Canadian Whitetail TV. Dean, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
You know, your show is pretty cool. I've enjoyed it. I think you've been doing it for almost 15 years now, haven't you?
Yeah, we're doing season 16 right now.
That's pretty awesome. If you guys don't know the show, it's on Pursuit Channel. It's on Wild TV if you're up in Canada, Canadian Whitetail, and it's all over social media. Dean, you know, I kind of know how you started. I know that you, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a guy named Jason Peterson. He had a show. It was called, wasn't it Hunting Canada and Beyond or something like that?
Yeah, you bet.
And you worked with him for a while before you started your own show?
Yeah, I used to help him a little bit and used to do some filming for him. But we were always just too heavy into the whitetail stuff to be around more. But he was always going off and filming, different kind of hunts for different big game. And what we did was he was short all the time in whitetail footage, so he had kind of asked if he supplied the equipment, if we would just film one or two of our deer hunts a year for him for his show. And that's kind of how we got into the filming side of things.
What did you do before that? Like, how did you? What were you doing for a job up until that point?
I just was a warehouse manager at a steel shop, especially metals, like operations manager, and we were lucky enough to have early schedules, so we were off work at 2:00. We could hunt deer every day, all right through the season, and everything we did was kind of tailored to the jobs we had, were to make sure that we could get hunting the most, to making sure we could get in the deer woods.
And that's pretty cool. You grew up, I believe, either inside or just near Saskatoon.
Yeah, we grew up on a farm just west of Saskatoon. Yeah.
If you guys aren't familiar with that, and I know a lot of you aren't, I've traveled to Canada. I have not had anywhere near the luck that you guys have had, because you've lived there and you've done it. But Saskatchewan, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, but it really shocked me the first time I went there, because I was thinking, coming from Wisconsin, I was thinking Canada was like northern Wisconsin everywhere, which is woods and lakes, and that's it. And if you get to Saskatoon especially, it's some pretty fertile farm ground.
Oh yeah, and Saskatchewan's so diverse, even in what we do for our deer hunting. Because around Saskatoon where I live, it's a lot like Midwest. It's open farmland with rolling hills, river valleys, and not a lot of big bricks of timber. If you go up to our outfitting camps, my closest south camp is only about two hours away, and it's right on the farm fringe. We got a 24-mile border of farm fringe, and north of that, it's just dozens and dozens of miles of solid timber, and it changes into like what you were talking about, like northern Minnesota type, just massive woods with no roads.
Very vast. I've hunted that area, and it's unbelievably vast. So you do outfitting up there north of Saskatoon?
Yeah, we've got two camps up in northwest Saskatchewan. Yeah.
So how does that work? We're going to get into some of this, but for people who aren't familiar, how does that work for you as a quote unquote outfitter? Do you have to lease the ground? How does that work?
Saskatchewan's kind of a unique setup. So there's outfitter licenses in the province, but there's no new licenses since, like the late 80s. So if you want to be an outfitter, the only option is to go to an existing outfitter and buy out their license. Yeah.
So you get their license, and then, but you don't get do you get a certain area or?
Yeah, it's all allocated. So,
okay.
So if you run into an outfitter and he's got his outfitter's license, it'll be a certain area with a certain allocation of deer that he's allowed to hunt there, certain allocation of bears and wolves that he's allowed to hunt there as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I have hunted there. It's been a few years, and I didn't know how that go. First of all, I'm going to back us into here, because the neat thing about your show, number one, are the big deer. Obviously, you have big whitetails. One thing I thought was interesting is Dean's show was the first whitetail-specific TV show in Canada. And Deer and Deer Hunting was the first whitetail-specific media source in America. So we're kind of ours started in '73. You started 15 years ago, but it's pretty neat. So where Canada and the U.S. collide here, that's all we do is talk about whitetails. But your show is 100% whitetails, big bucks, but you tell the story. And what I find absolutely fascinating is you're hunting the deer that everybody dreams about, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old bucks and older. How do you even approach that? Because I know how difficult that is.
It's mostly a lot of time, and I don't know if it makes sense, but it's a lot of time and not a big concern on whether you shoot one or not. One thing we found, and everybody changes, as a kind of mature as a hunter. As soon as we kind of stopped worrying about whether or not we were going to kill a buck this year, we started killing really big deer. So if we're watching a deer, well, this is a good example. This year we're having a hard time in the farmland. A couple nights ago we filmed an awesome, 175-inch deer. It was a young deer, and there was just, like, you'd love to take that deer, but there was no interest in shooting him because, you just knew he wasn't old enough. And it's not something that we expect everybody else should do, but as soon as we kind of relaxed on making sure we had to get a deer this year and kind of leaning on the side of, letting them go and seeing if they'll survive another year to see what might happen, that's when we really started having some pretty special deer to hunt. But it's a pretty special deer that makes it. Most of the deer that you let go, usually when the rifles come out, they don't last too long. But
do you lose a lot of big deer that way through when gun season comes around?
Oh yeah, and that's kind of part of the problem with I guess you'd call it like the fantasy around TV is when we do an episode on a deer, that we've watched, and maybe we'll hunt him when he's 9 years old. You just don't have enough time to share everything where that is the story of that deer, but in that 9 years of following that deer, there might have been 20 bucks fall off the map. Like when we started watching that deer, I might have been watching 15 deer, and he's the one that actually made it. So Saskatchewan's different in the sense that we don't have near the population as a lot of the places or the popular hunting places in the States. So everybody kind of falsely thinks there's less pressure, but we don't have the deer either. Our deer density in Saskatchewan is far less than it is in, the Midwest. I've seen a statistic in Illinois, there's more deer hit on the highway than are harvested by hunters an entire year in Saskatchewan. So we have a very low deer density compared to popular, deer hunting areas. So we might not have the amount of people hunting, but we don't have the amount of deer either. So the pressure, it starts to kind of level off,
I'm going to pull this up because I was actually prepared for you for this. You guys have to Google this because in Canada they go by hectares, which I don't know how that translates.
It's like 2 acres.
2 acres. So, Quebec is 76 million hectares. So that's like, 150 million acres of woods. Saskatchewan, I know, is bigger than that. But 350,000 deer approximately. The province is huge.
Yeah.
And only, we go by, this is what we publish in our almanac, about 20,000 deer killed a year by residents. Now, I don't know how many non-residents kill, but we kill more deer in this county where I'm sitting. This county is 50,000 acres. Then Saskatchewan kills an entire year. So that puts it in perspective as far as they don't have 40, 50, 60, 70 deer per square mile. It doesn't exist. But also you have those bucks that can somehow survive to those older ages. And we're going to get to that in a minute. I know that this is a family affair for you. Your wife, your daughter, your son all partake in this. And they're on the show as well?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good with the kids. They've grown up spending a lot of time in the deer woods, so it's been quite enjoyable for them.
I've seen the shows where your wife has killed deer. Your son was just on your social media page here with a giant 8-pointer here a couple weeks ago. But your daughter, I want to talk about specifically because you had a TV show that I watched here the other day. She has got a lucky horseshoe like no one I've ever seen before.
It's ridiculous and inexplicable, And the last few years, we feel kind of like bad parents, but because we've tried to actually push her into not being successful, and it's just the luck she's had, right? There's a couple years, you're talking about old deer. In 2021, she killed a 10-year-old deer, and it was a deer that we had hunted. I had filmed a friend of mine wound a deer, in 2015. He'd hit him high in the back. The deer disappeared. We found him the next year. He'd gone downhill. It took him 5 years to come back. and we had never seen that deer in that entire 5-year period again, except we would get a couple pictures of them late at night. Sorry. On the first day of the season, we were looking through pictures. My daughter sees him. She's like, well, that's the deer that we're going to hunt. We went and got everything set up, but I was laughing with my wife about, like, this is the year that it's going to be the end of December. She's going to be freezing in her blind, and I'm going to be kind of laughing about, she's got to learn what it takes to kill big deer. And we walked out the door. My wife said, well, good luck. And Taylor said, I don't need luck. I'll be back in a little bit. And at that time of year, it doesn't get dark until 9 o'clock. We got in the blind at 5:30, and at 6:30, she had the deer dead.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
It's wild. And every year, it just seems to be like one thing like that. This year's a good example. We've got some wild content to send out about a hunt it's too crazy to even explain. But we had a struggle this year kind of trying to find deer. We were 3 or 4 days into the season, and my daughter said, well, let's just go sit and just start sitting, because we just enjoy sitting and watching deer. I had one picture of a deer July 15th at a stand. I said, well, we'll just go sit there and film some of the other bucks that are there. Same thing, 10 after 7, that one picture from July, buck walks in broadside. And she just kind of smirks at the camera. Like it's just turned into a rolling joke, I can't explain it, but I would pay good money for that luck.
That is, I would too, because I've hunted Canada 5 or 6 times. I've never killed a big deer. And
yeah,
I've never seen one.
Yeah, but last year she'd killed her 8th deer, 2 of them in net Boone and Crockett, and she'd spent a total of 12 days in the deer woods.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
But that's 12 days hunting. One thing that I should point out is, both of the kids and even my wife a little bit, like on social media, and everybody knows how social media is. They get beat up a little bit. Like my son shot that big 8-point this year, and there was quite a few comments about, oh, it must be nice, to have your dad and his friends kind of walk you out to a big deer. But what a lot of people don't see, I think people that watch the show do see, is these kids from the time they were born. Like my son might only be 15, but I would bet he's put more hours in the deer woods than a lot of 45-year-old men that are hunting.
No, I know,
so
and I know how it goes.
Nice deer, but they've put their time in.
And yes, granted, you know what you're doing, and you do have a great situation. However, the amount and there's skill there, obviously. And by the way, your daughter's name is Taylor, because my daughter's name is Taylor. That's how I remembered it. She's one heck of a shot. Every single arrow is, when I'm looking at that deer, I'd put it right, boom, and she hits it. And that's not easy. Yeah. That's not easy if you're a kid and you're hunting a forkhorn or a doe or a 170, 80-inch buck. I can't imagine what that's like, but they're focused and they've got that right. But the question is now we're talking about hunting Canada, and I know every province is different. Saskatchewan, you can bait. I don't think you can bait in Ontario. I'm not positive about Alberta. You'll have to help me with that. But
you can in Ontario, but you can't in Alberta.
Okay, you can't in Alberta.
Yeah.
How does that work where you're hunting? Because my limited knowledge is I just don't have the mental edge. The guy, the first hunt I took was probably 25, 30 years ago, and the guy told me, he said, we have big bucks, but the buck we want you to kill will come through this area once this week. And I'm like, What do you mean? Within the next 7 days or 10 days, we expect this buck to come through there. So I put 63 hours in a blind, did not see that deer. Is that kind of how it is hunting where you're hunting?
It depends kind of on each specific deer. Like you're talking about hunting over a bait, if that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
So every deer is kind of unique and specific, and baiting in Saskatchewan, and we use it. And a lot of people kind of say it's kind of a crutch or like a style of baiting. But if you remove that, you go and you do your homework, you set up, and then you use bait as a tool to try to help the work you've done already. But every deer is different. The older bucks, obviously they're not quite as relaxed about it. Some deer come through, quite often. And then we were talking about the different geographical issues in Saskatchewan, and that changes too. When you get up north to our outfitting camps, it's vastly different hunting than here at home, where everything is different, where a lot of our big deer that are killed at the outfitting camps are killed at baits, but those deer, they may never come to the bait. We tell our hunters to watch. They'll be 30 yards back in the trees. They'll come by. And it's very different than our hunting here, and it's something we struggle with hunters, because in today's kind of technology with trail cameras and that, when our hunters come to camp, the first thing they want to do is show me the buck I'm going to hunt.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll tell you, like, I wish I knew, because we're on, my South Camp is 300,000 acres,
Wow.
300,000 acres. We do the best we can. I don't have a clue what's there. We've got a good handle on resident bucks, and we know, but these aren't farmland bucks that have a specific travel pattern. We might have a big deer on camera this week at this stand, and next week he might be 3 miles away in a different valley. Um, so just relying on bait and trail cameras when you get into the North Bush can be kind of detrimental. I think um, our success rate on big deer at the camps has not increased from trail cameras at all. In some ways, it might have decreased, because if I've got a hunter and my guide or I are saying this stand is really hot, we've got 2 new bucks here a day, and just statistically, I know a big one's going to move through here this week. Sometimes we'll have a hard time, motivating a hunter to want to hunt that stand if we don't have that picture of the deer that he's, supposed to kill, right?
Is that and that probably answers the question there. Have I'm assuming most of the guys that come to camps are probably from the States.
Yeah, the majority, yeah.
And have hunters in general become more impatient over the years because of that?
I don't know about impatient. Um, I don't know what the right word was. It would be, they want a better, like a bigger plan, And if you were to come hunt with me at my farm, we would sit down and we'd look at trail camera pictures, and we'd be like, this is the buck we're after. If you come to hunt with me at my camp, it's just a totally different game. So we might look at we might show the hunter a couple deer that are in the area, and it's the same thing. All the deer are different. There might be a stand with a fairly regular deer, but essentially what we're hunting is like busy, high traffic deer areas, because those deer they just don't have a schedule. Most of our deer are shot at lunchtime, versus you come home here, we don't even hunt at lunch. I go and I sit in the morning. Sometimes I go home. I don't go back until the last 3 hours of the day. If we only hunted the last 3 hours of the day at camp, we'd never shoot a deer.
Wow.
Like by the time it's 3:30 in the afternoon for most of our hunters, we hunt till dark, but by 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, if you haven't shot a deer today, it's over.
Yeah.
So a lot of our guys that are used to hunting, the Midwest and stuff, they come up to the camp and they kind of want a specific plan. Our specific plan is just to kill the best deer we can this week. And that might not be, looking through 3 books full of, trail camera photos. But guys that have been up there, they know I've got a fellow that's hunted the area, my North Camp area, for over 20 years. He's hunted with me for 12 years now. And he's killed some big deer, like 190-inch double drop tine. His son killed a 203. And everybody always says, how does he kill such big deer? I said, well, when he shows up to camp, he doesn't want to look at trail cameras. So, the big double drop tine buck he shot with us, we had one picture of that deer October 31st. He showed up to camp November 20th. And he was asking what was around. I said, this stand is busy. We had a big deer came through there once, but not since the 31st. He said, do you think we should hunt it? I think it would be crazy not to hunt it. And he shot it on Wednesday,
Wow.
So, once our hunters have been up a couple times, they kind of get on to how it works to get our best odds. But we do run into it. We have a hunter that comes up for the first time. And if you don't want to show them trail camera pictures of like his target buck, then they start wondering, well, is there just nothing big here, or what's, how come we're not looking at pictures of deer? And I don't know what to show them, because I can show them pictures of a big deer that's 3 miles away that I think we're actually going to kill over here this week, but that's kind of hard to explain to the fella.
That is, and that's fascinating. That's something that's hard, especially for a first-time hunter. I've been that guy, that you can't wrap your head around it. What is are there any specific environmental factors, or is it just because of the rut that cause an area like that to become hot? I know it's not the bait. I know that there's bait there and it does draw deer in, but what are some of the things that you look for that you'll say, yeah, this is shaping up to be a pretty good spot for this week?
Yeah, like a lot of it's the does in the rut. And just geographically, like pinch points and big valleys. And in the Northwoods, like you're talking about big valleys. So you're talking about, like massive creeks that are going for miles and miles that kind of join in at one spot. And we've got stands that year after year that we might not have a picture of a big deer there, but I know we're going to kill a big deer there, come the season. And see, that's where trail cameras help the guides a little bit is, all of our stands are checked every third day. And then you see like an increase in activity at this stand, and on that big of a property or that much habitat, that if you're getting, more does running through there, more hot does running through there, and new bucks start showing up, more and more, just because there's quality deer in the area, that's going to be a spot where, like this week, one of those new bucks showing up is going to be a real good one.
So what would your advice be to to somebody who's coming up there the first time? What should they expect?
Like expect for results, or expect,
no, what should they expect to get them into the right frame to put themselves in position for success?
To really trust their guide and be open to that, because I've always explained to our guys that, if you're in my camp, like you want to kill a big deer, but there's two people that want to see you kill a big deer more than you do yourself, and that's your guide and that's me, because it's what we do. So sometimes your guide might want to go here, and you don't, you may not, maybe you don't agree because, again, you don't have pictures of the deer there, but usually your guide is not wanting to take you to that stand or move you to that stand for no reason. Our goal is to get you on the biggest deer that we can at the outfitting camps, and with such big ground up there and those deer moving so much, their home areas are way bigger than they are here in the farmland. So that deer, if you get three, if I get a picture of a buck Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at stand A, by the time we pull the card, a lot of times it might be too late, and he might be in a week or 2 weeks before he's back through that area, but your guide might know, well, when he sees them kind of in this valley, the next place he always kind of seems to pop up is over here. So let's go get ahead of him and hunt here this week,
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by the new Gen 4 series by Hoyt. These bows have a new 5-module system where every inch of draw is optimized for speed and efficiency. Their most advanced cam system is able to reduce torque and improve that natural point of aim. To check out the Carbon RX9, the Alpha AX2, and the rest of the Gen 4 bows, log on to Hoyt.com. And one thing that I've found, because I've found myself doing this too, and I don't know if you have any crystal ball advice for this, but you put a guy in a spot, day 1, day 2, day 3, comes to be morning of day 4, and it's like, okay, where are we going? The guy, the hunter, me, where are we going today? We're going back to that same spot. I'm like, I just can't do it. I can't. Yeah. I can't sit there and look at the same spot for another 12 hours or however long it's going to be. How do you coach a guy through that?
Like examples are good. So, we try to motivate the guy to go back. At the end of the day, it's his hunt. I would never take a hunter to a stand or a client to a stand that he won't go to. But last year is a great example of it was one of the hunts we decided to film, which was great. So now we've got a solid example where, Brian Smith was up to hunt, and there was a big double drop beam buck. He had 12-inch drops. His beams dropped at the end of his, right at the end of his beams, they dropped down 12 inches. And he's been hunting with us since 2018, and that was his dream deer, and it's a stand he drew. And his hunt was terrible. Like, it was so slow. I think Monday he's seen a doe and a fawn, and Tuesday he's seen a doe. And we were in the exact same situation. It was Thursday, and he's like, dude, I don't know if I have another day in me just to go sit and stare at this hell. And I was like, well, you've dreamed of this, like since you first seen, we have quite a genetic in northern Saskatchewan for these drop beams. I said, since you've seen one, like that's been your dream deer, and and this deer has the drops of all. So our choice is to go back there and put another day in on your dream deer. He's gone. He's obviously with a doe or something. He's going to be back through here. Or, we can move over to a guaranteed mature 145-inch deer, and you just shoot another deer that is whatever, And he hummed and hawed, and he's like, hey, we'll go back. So I went and got him back in there with his cameraman, and I was maybe 3 miles away after dropping him off, and he phoned, he just shot him.
Oh, wow.
And it can happen in the first, 5 minutes or the last kind of 10 minutes of the hunter's hunt. And there's kind of no way to decipher between there. And if you want to kill, it depends on our hunter's target too, and I talked to all our guys before they come up. A lot of our guys, like 100% success is never our goal. Our goal is to make sure our hunters have the chance at the deer that they're looking for. So I have guys call with, sometimes with crazy, asks of, but if I have somebody call and they say, hey, Dean, I want to kill a 180-inch deer, I'll tell them like, yeah, like we can absolutely do that. And they're like, oh, like, okay, like we can get one this year. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, but if you come up if you give me 4 years, we'll get you that deer, but you can't shoot anything, until we get that 180-inch deer, and it might be on the first day of your first hunt, might be on the last day of your fourth hunt, but if you want to kill a legit 180-inch deer, on average, this is how many trips you're going to have to make to do it. And the discipline is going to be not shooting that 150-inch deer or that 158-inch deer or that 160-inch deer on day 3, year 2, year 4. It's to put the time in and get the results, you know. So we work with each of our hunters kind of on what their main goal is. I've got guys that have hunted with me for years that are going to kill the first, you know, real mature deer that they see, and that's fine too, you know.
We're talking with Dean Partridge, Canadian Whitetail. I could sit here and talk to you all day on this stuff. One thing, or explain to me, how do you you got that? I'm using that first time hunter or first time Canadian hunter example. How do you explain to somebody? Because guys come in there and they think they can age deer or they think they can score deer on the hoof. These deer are completely different animals. How do you go ahead educating them?
For deer, not always, but it usually works in our favor because our deer on general are such, you know, bigger bodied deer that we very seldom run into, you know, a hunter shooting a deer and having misjudged it and he has ground shrinkage. You know, quite often when our hunters walk up to their deer, like as far as antlers go, it's quite a bit bigger than they expected because instead of looking at a 175-pound deer, they were looking at a 270-pound deer. So, you know, it obviously changes the aspect ratio of what his rack looks like. So we don't, you know, I hunted in Texas once, and the first day the sun came up, I thought I was surrounded by giants. Like every deer looked like a monster, but it was like, you know, compared to our deer, it was like German shepherds with antlers, you know,
Right.
so it made their antlers look so much bigger. So we don't have too much of an issue with that. That's one place where trail cameras really help us at camp is instead of focusing on target bucks, you know, if there's younger resident deer at a stand, we'll really show them pictures of deer that we're, you know, wanting to let survive to focus on, you know, not getting those deer shot. Um, and then we just, you know, we kind of talk to them about body shapes because the one thing about misjudging age up here is because they're a lot bigger bodied deer, it's quite easy for somebody that's used to smaller deer to overage, you know, like a 4-year-old deer that looks quite mature just because he's bigger and more robust, you know. So there's the same things to look at, just more exaggerated with, you know, with the brisket and the belly and their back starting to sag. Um, but the quality of the deer, we don't. It's very seldom we run into a hunter that shoots a deer that thinks it's big and then walks up to it and is disappointed that it's not as big. They usually grow, which is kind of nice because their antlers, you know, their body size is so much bigger that aspect ratio is just off compared to what they're used to.
That's very nice. Very nice problem to have. What in for your purposes, what is maturity? What are you looking for? How old are you trying to get these deer?
So that varies a lot, you know, from camp to the farmland too. So in the farmland where we hunt, we generally won't even look at a deer unless he's 6. And at least even then, we've found that for the large, I mean, every deer is different. But if you want to average it out on deer that we followed through sheds, their biggest year is either 8 or 7, and then followed by 9 and 6. So 7 would be ideal. It's hard to get them there. We'll start looking at a buck that, you know, that's 6 years old or older. At camp, you know, we get like at home, some of the oldest deer we followed well, multiple deer now, I think 4 deer now to 14 years old. That's not going to happen in the forest, you know. I mean, it might sometimes, but not like it does here. Not for pressure, but it's just nutrition, predators, the entire life they live is a totally different life. So at camp, we try to target 6-year-old bucks. Depending on what they look like at 3 and 4, we might look at a 5-year-old, but it's usually 6. But you know, here, if it's a real special 6-year-old in the farmland, we'll go and hunt it. If not, we'll try to let him get, you know, to 7 years old. At camp, if he's a 6-year-old deer, you know, we probably better get hunting them because the clock is probably ticking on them, you know.
That's amazing. You can't do that in hardly any place in North America. Is, you know, get deer to that age. Is you mentioned a couple of them. What are the biggest, other than hunters? Well, other than your hunters, what are the biggest threats to a buck to getting to that age?
Like in the forest, it would just be just wolves and the weather, really. You know, I would say it's wolves and the weather. They're starting to open up wolf hunting in Saskatchewan a little bit for our clients, which helps us get a little bit better handle on it. And then the weather, you know, and it's the weather's a downside, but it's also why we have such big-bodied, robust, big-antlered deer is the weather. You know, they've had to evolve to have that body mass and that size to be able to withstand that weather. So it's kind of a give and take that, you know, we can have a bad winter come in and decimate the deer, but at the same time, it's that weather that gives us the deer that we have to hunt too. You know, in the farmland, it would be, you know, like hunting pressure. Coyotes are becoming a big problem. You know, I know there's a lot of arguments about how many deer coyotes really target, but around our place here in the farmland, the coyotes are killing a lot of deer.
How bad is
And weather, you know, and weather too.
how bad is the wolf situation farther north?
It really depends on the area and how much the trapper in the area is kind of participating in it. You know, I've seen some areas that just get decimated, and some areas not so bad. Even between our north and south camp, it varies quite a bit. You know, like our south area, the wolves are not much of a problem, but we've got a great trapper in there that, you know, puts a lot of time in. So it, you know, it really varies. For the longest time, you know, a resident or a U.S. client was not allowed to, you know, even think about hunting a wolf. Last year, they were allowed to get a wolf tag, but we weren't allowed to target a wolf. This year, they're allowed to get a wolf tag, and we can keep hunting wolves after they shoot a deer. So it's slowly, you know, opening up a little bit to let people manage the wolves better, because for a large part, the trappers, you know, with hides and the furs not you know, having the market value they used to, that they're a lot less, you know, invested in it. So giving us a chance to manage them a little bit more, you know, will be quite helpful.
That would be a fun hunt, I think. I mean, it's a very rare hunt to have, and it'd be a fun thing to do. Specifically, we're talking about mature deer. We're talking about hunting them. I know there's a lot of techniques to getting close, a lot of tactics for not getting busted. I know you guys believe in ozone generators. Give us some insights on how you stay a step ahead of their nose when you're actually hunting them, especially like in a blind or something like that where it's up close and personal.
Yeah, well, and that's something that comes in if you're trying to watch a deer for that long and try to get him to that age. You also, you know, one thing we've always been careful of is from the first time you ever sit there or have an encounter with that deer, you know, you're educating that deer for years until you want to harvest them. And by the time you actually want to hunt that deer, you might have created, you know, an unkillable monster, because if you've just continually educated them. And that's where, you know, the ozonics and all the way we hunt comes into play, like through the year. So, you know, at home, we always use an ozonics. At our camps, I supply one for every one of our hunters. And we've took that on ourselves. You know, we used to recommend guys to bring them, and we just finally said, no, like, we're just going to have them here charge ready for our hunters every day. And it's for that process. So we look at every deer hunt. You know, if you come up to hunt a deer at the camp, we don't look at it as a week hunt. Like, that's a 6-year or 5-year hunt for that deer. You're just, you know, on the shooting end of it, right? So every time we have a deer, you know, a guy on stand, we want, you know, to be quiet, scent control, to keep as little disturbance to that area, and educating those deer as little as possible. And it's the same at home here. You know, there's deer that we've filmed for 7, 8, or even 9 years before we've hunted them. And the key to that has been, you know, making sure that you're not busting the plot out every night that you get out, because it doesn't seem like much tonight because there's not a buck there you want to hunt, but the buck that's out on that plot you just busted, he might be the deer you want to hunt in 3 or 4 years. And everything you just add to his, you know, his memory is just educating him that much more. So, you know, making sure scent control is perfect every night that we're running our ozonics. And we had a great example. I was talking with Buddy from Ozonics the other night. We had a great example that just 3 days ago. You know, we're having a tough season here right now on the farmland. I had a 7x7, like a real long beam, narrow 7x7. I wanted to go have a look at. I got into my stand 3 days ago. I looked at my pack and I'm like, oh, I didn't have my ozonics because I forgot to charge the battery. Is dead. And I thought, you know, like, it's no big deal. It's one sit. It's not going to be an issue, right? And I was sitting at crosswind. Long story short, right at prime time, the deer jumps out about 60 yards down the fence. He started to curl in to come past us, and he just dipped down a little bit too low into our crosswind and busted out. And we haven't got a picture of him now. Well, that was 3 days ago.
Wow.
So not taking care of it just that one night, you know, might have, you know, like, that's a big mature deer. It might be over for that deer for the year. You know, we might spend the rest of the year just trying to pick back up on them. But that same thing could have happened last year with that deer. And a lot of people don't pay enough attention to educating those deer when they're younger. Or, you know, if you're sitting at a stand for a certain buck, every other deer there matters, you know, just as much, because that buck behaves how he behaves based on the behavior of all the other deer in the area too. You know, I've often said, like like trying to kill a big deer is like trying to cross a stream without putting a ripple in it, and that might be over a week or it might be over several years. That every time that that a deer wins you, comes across your trail, that you bust them off a plot is like putting a rock in that river, and it creates kind of a ripple around it, and before you know it, you have rapids, and that's kind of the quality of your hunt is how still you can keep that, between the time that you start and between the time you get a shot at that deer.
That's some really good advice, because especially like if you would just listen to what he said, it's so compounded when that deer is getting older. Like you said, you might have a deer that's unkillable. Like
Yeah.
here, I've done it. I've hunted with ozonics since they came out for years, and I think you're going to tell me that you do it differently, but I've hunted stands where the wind has been completely wrong and got away with it. I'm assuming you're not going to be going into areas if that wind is completely wrong, even if you've got that advantage.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it really has nothing to do with ozonics. It's got to do with, we treat every hunt so specifically that the way we look at it is, we've said it on the show for years, is not making little mistakes kills big deer. And mistakes always come from taking chances. And there's times there's definitely times to take a chance. But if I'm going to go hunt a stand or go and try to film a deer, everything's got to be perfect. Like the weather conditions, the wind direction. And then we use, on ozonics religiously to stop any issues. If we have a downwind deer, a swirl, a dead wind, or a doe decides to curl in behind the stand on her way out to the field, it's all safety and ensuring there's no mistake, and we usually have enough stands or deer on the go that we can hunt, like whatever the conditions are today, I've probably got a spot that I can go. So we try to avoid taking chances where we can, but there's times you have to. 2019, I killed a really nice deer with my Excalibur. Same thing. I was going back and forth between camp. I only had 2 days left to hunt, and the deer that I wanted to kill was daylighting like crazy, and the wind was terrible. So I took 2 units. I went in there. I put him in, and he walked in, and I shot him, and it was great proof that you can sit on a wrong wind, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do it tomorrow.
And
like
it was a risk. You did take you did take a big chance.
Yeah, and I might work up to taking that risk again, but if I was hunting the next day for a different deer and I had time, I would be doing it when the conditions are right, and saving any of those kind of risks for something that I think might, kind of a Hail Mary of sorts, right?
That's a really cool story. Let's
But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
well, it's just really changed the way a guy hunts, because if you shorten it, I talk about watching a deer over years, but you shorten it to hunting, a specific buck. So if you're kind of hunt X deer on a plot or a bait or wherever you're going to hunt them, the biggest drawback I've ever found to being able to kill that deer is, again, all the other deer. It just depends whether you get a chance at that deer or you burn that spot out first. Whichever happens first seems to be what happens. You burn the spot out and you're back to square one, or you get a chance at him before you've burnt it out. And that's what I was talking about, even if your target buck's not in the plot, not busting other deer out of the plot. And that's where things like ozonics have really helped us too, because I can extend how long I can hunt or how hard I can hunt an area easily with an ozonics, because, even if you hunt when everything's right, it's the woods. You can't control it. You always have deer go downwind. You always have deer cross your trail. So if I get in a stand, your best chance to kill that buck, I always say, is like the first day you sit there, and it starts to go down every day after, because even by being there, you're kind of screwing it up, and you're changing how the woods interact, or interacts with the other deer, and how the deer move through there. But with like scent control, like in ozonics, that downwind deer that happens on the third day doesn't bust. That's huge. It doesn't seem like much. It's huge. So instead of being able to hunt that stand 3 days and then, conditions changing, and then, hunting it another 3 or 4 days, this season, if I can extend how hard I can hunt that stand, the increase that makes to me having a chance of success with that buck is astronomical, just by not being able to burn out that stand. And that's where, everybody gets different benefits out of the tools they have to hunt, whether it's trail cameras or ozonics, but that's where ozonics has helped us the best, where, just for an example, instead of hunting a stand, 3 days this week before I start to cause problems, if I can extend that to 5 or 6, that's massive on our success rate.
That's huge. Give me a brief your insights on what would your favorite conditions be to see deer movement, temperature, wind, a moon, anything? Are there's anything specifically when you see it coming up on the weather forecast, you're like, yeah, this is going to be a good time for me?
Yeah, and weather's a big thing here because we have we've got a big fluctuation of weather in September or in Saskatchewan. Our hunters that come up to camp, they always, we outfit for 5 weeks, and they ask which week's the best, and I tell them the coldest and snowiest one, and they ask which one's that, and I would throw a dart at November, and like it changes every year. For deer quality of hunting or for success rate, like I love the 2 or 3 days leading up to poor weather, to a temperature drop, and especially up here like snowstorms. um, for and I think the 2 or 3 days after are almost as good, but not as good. But I like the 2 or 3 days after because they're usually just, I find it some of the most enjoyable times to be in the deer woods after you have, a big storm or something. It changes kind of how the woods are, and you got all the fresh snow. But I think those days up to a severe change in weather is really the top days to have a big deer on his feet in good light.
Perfect. Okay, last question for you, Dean. This is going to be, it might be involved. Okay, you're in Saskatchewan. You're talking about Canada in general. I know that there's, correct me if I'm wrong, 8 provinces that have whitetails. What are some of the other good go-to spots in Canada for hunting big deer, big whitetails?
Alberta is really good. Northern Alberta is good. And Manitoba has some really good whitetails too. I don't have much experience in Ontario. Ontario's got a lot of hunters, but there's pockets of good deer there too. But really, if I was ranking the province, I'd go Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba would be what I'd be looking at.
And then I think if you get farther east, Quebec has probably got a lot of deer, but just not big ones, as big.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even Saskatchewan and Alberta, it'd be hard to say which one's the top or like number 1 and 2. And it depends on how you like to hunt. In Saskatchewan, you're going to hunt long days and blinds, and you have the ability to hover bait. Alberta, you don't. It's going to be a lot more like sitting cut lines and oil field leases and in field edges. So Alberta kills some pretty big deer too, and it's just different hunting than you're going to experience mostly in Saskatchewan.
That was my example from before. I was hunting. He said a cut line. They called it a seismic cut, so it was a very narrow cut through. I think they were spruce, and staring down. And you can't bait. So staring down that thing with fresh snow, day after day after day after day, to the point where I literally thought I was going to go insane because we weren't seeing anything. But in camp, to that outfitter's credit, that was my last question, because my dad, rest his soul, his biggest thing was he didn't care about antlers as far as the size. He always wanted to know the weight of the deer.
Yeah.
Those guys killed some monster heavy deer. What are some of the heaviest bucks that you've seen? I don't know. Do you weigh them on the hoof or field dress, or what are some of the heaviest ones you've seen in your life?
You'll probably get as mad at me as I get in trouble on social media. I don't think I've ever weighed a deer.
Really? Oh my gosh!
It's so bizarre when guys come to camp and they'll shoot a giant body deer and they'll be like, "What does it weigh?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Really? Oh my gosh!
It's just a geographical thing. Like nobody in Saskatchewan has ever talked about deer weights. And I have hunters call me and they're like, "Well, what's the average size of your deer?" And I said, "Well, an average mature deer in my outfitting area is going to be 145 to 165. We can get a bigger deer, but that depends on your ability to weight it out." And they're like, "I thought deer were bigger than 145 pounds in Saskatchewan." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what they weigh. Like we've killed some big deer, that are 350,
Wow.
but we don't weigh them all." But I think this is
well, bless your heart, because I just assumed you would have had a scale in there when you're weighing those things.
I think I'm going to break down and get one this year though, because some guys get really upset if we don't know the weight of the deer.
Well, and you look at the things, and I know I've seen some outfitters, they have 2 quads, 2 ATVs, and to get a single buck out of the woods, kind of like what they used to do with, or I think what they still do with moose or something like that. But that tells you how big and heavy a buck is. You got this little ATV, and you're trying to pull that thing out, and one won't even do it.
Yeah. No, we get some pretty big. It's like anywhere. Like we get, we've got average sized deer there, and even smaller body deer there. But the upper end of body size is way beyond. Even like my closest camp to my house is 2 hours. We don't get deer the body size around my house at the farm here even close. The way we do in the forest. It's bizarre.
Wow, it's an enchanted land, that is for sure. Dean, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're probably heading back out to the woods either today or very soon.
Yeah. Yeah, about 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Well, we'll let you get out there. Dean, thank you so much. Where can people go to find all that great Canadian whitetail content?
We've put it pretty much everywhere now. Like our show airs on Pursuit Channel in the States and Wild TV in Canada. We have it on Waypoint TV and Carbon TV online. Our YouTube channel, we put all our episodes. We've kind of put it everywhere just so people can watch. That's the biggest thing we've enjoyed, is just being able to share the stories of these deer with people, and kind of not being a lot less about the high-fiving and shooting them, and more about just kind of chronicling how incredible some of these deer really are. So we try to get it everywhere we can.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the talk today.
You bet. Thank you.
For Dean Partridge, I am Dan Schmidt. You guys have to check out the YouTube page. I mean, you're going to watch the show on Pursuit or Wild TV, but their YouTube page, you can watch all these episodes, and then they have like bonus content, short videos, and stuff like that. For Dean Partridge, I am Dan Schmidt and Isabella Riggs. We will catch you next week, Thursday, for another brand new episode. Again, all we ask you to do is like and subscribe to the Deer Talk Now podcast wherever you're watching the podcast or listening to podcast. We will catch you again next week, Thursday, for another brand new episode. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Mossberg, Wildlife Research Center, Traditions Firearms, Outdoor Edge Knives, Hoyt Archery, and 10 Point Crossbow.